ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਸੀਜੇ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਸ਼ੋ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਹਰ ਥਰਸਡੇ 7 to 8 o'clock ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ ਦੇ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਕਰਾਈਦਾ ਆ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਾਕਟਰਸ, ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨ, ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਸਟ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਈ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿਊਅਰਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਅੱਜ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਹਨ ਕੈਨ ਹਾਰਡੀ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਆਟਵਾ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਫਰੋਮ Fleetwood Port Calls. He is a former broadcaster, freelance journalist, and public affairs executive. And he's serving his second term as a member of parliament from Fleetwood Port Calls. And so also a second term as a member of parliamentary standing committee on fisheries and oceans. He's a native of Alberta and Ken spent most of his life in the lower mainland of British Columbia. He graduated from the West Vancouver Senior Secondary School and went on to study economics at the University of BC. His first career through was in radio, first as a producer of open line programs and then as an on-air host and program manager at station in northern BC, Northwest Ontario, Manitoba, and finally in Kamloops. It's always nice to interview a broadcaster in his past life, and now he's a politician. Ken, welcome to CJ Sidhu Show.
Thank you, CJ. That's got to be a pretty awful combination that we've seen happen so many times in British Columbia's history. You know, an old friend of mine, the late Rafe Mayer, Jim Nielsen, who actually gave me my first job in radio, and Chuck Cook, who I worked with. I mean, and in fact, in the House of Commons right now, there's probably close to a dozen recovering broadcasters who are having just too much fun.
Oh yeah, and I see a lot of journalists jump into politics, and they do a pretty good job because they know how to talk to people and how to get your message across. Let's Ken start with the latest controversy about We Charity. So there is a lot of allegations, there are a lot of rumors flying around, there is a lot of skepticism around it, and I want to ask your take on this, Ken.
Well, I will put on my old radio hat first, because I think that the big flag that went up for a lot of people right off the bat was the fact that it was a sole source contract. In other words, it wasn't put out for bids. It was just simply awarded to a charity. And everybody involved in the decision knew that the Prime Minister and his family had long connections with this charity. In fact, a lot of people have had long connections with this charity. One of the Conservative leadership candidates, Peter MacKay, his wife worked with them. They have excellent credentials in the community. The Globe and Mail is a media sponsor. Heck, even on the tin of evaporated milk from Carnation, they show that they support the We campaign. If you look at how the decision was made, I think that the decision itself was almost exactly the same as a lot of decisions that we have made on support programs during the COVID-19 crisis. And that is, you get it out there as quickly as you can, and then if there are problems with the program, you fix them along the way. That old expression that you don't want perfection to be the enemy of good. And the We charity, that the charitable part of their foundation, was absolutely excellent at mobilizing young people. We've seen in Metro Vancouver them fill BC Place Stadium with kids for special, very inspirational events. And they've done this right across the country, which was one of the things I think that made them very attractive as the potential deliverer of this program, a volunteerism program for students. But it was a sole source contract, and that immediately draws a lot of attention. And then, of course, the reminder that the Prime Minister and his family had close ties with this organization certainly, fed the conspiracy theories that some people had. I have not had a chance to speak to the Prime Minister directly about this. I have some questions for him as a former broadcaster about how this decision was made. At the same time, Bardish Chagger, who's the minister responsible for the program, was in front of a committee today, and there'll be more committee meetings, the standing committees here in Ottawa, finance, ethics, and perhaps even one other, and they're going to dig more into the way the decision was made. And I think that that's the critical thing. Unfortunately, because the effort proved to be very controversial, we withdrew from the campaign, which has put it back in the laps of the public service that are very good at doing things, but not as good as we would have been. So there's going to be a delay in rolling this program out, but we'll work to get it out there, because at the heart of it all is support, financial support, for a bunch of very worthy students who want to contribute something to the COVID-19 response and who had an opportunity through this program to do it.
So, ਕੈਨ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਚੈਰਿਟੀ ਹੈ ਐਂਡ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਦਾ ਇਨਵੋਲਵਮੈਂਟ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੀ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ the issue is with basically ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੰਟਰੈਕਟ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੋਲ ਬਿਡਰ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੰਟਰੈਕਟ ਦੇਣਾ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਬ੍ਰੌਡਕਾਸਟਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਕੰਸਰਨ ਹੈ। ਪਰ ਇਸ ਚੈਰਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੰਬਰ ਆਫ ਈਅਰਸ there are a lot of Justin Trudeau's family was involved, even before Prime Minister ਬਣਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ। ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਪੀਟਰ ਮਕੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਾਈਫ, ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਗਲੋਬ ਐਂਡ ਮੇਲ ਵਾਜ਼ ਏ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਸਪਾਂਸਰ। ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਹਾਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਫਾਈਲ ਬੰਦੇ ਇਸ ਚੈਰਿਟੀ ਨਾਲ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੁਣ ਕਮੇਟੀਜ਼ ਬੈਠੀਆਂ ਆ, ਉਹ ਰਿਵਿਊ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਫਾਈਲ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੈਪਨ ਹੋਇਆ। ਸੋ ਕੈਨ ਮਾਈ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਵੈਨ Prime Minister's mother and his brother Alexander and even wife Sophie were made money speaking to their events and stuff. How you will tell the public and my viewers that it's not a conflict of interest?
Well, I'm not in a position to say one way or the other. I think that's what you have the ethics commissioner for. That's what you have the committee process for. I'm not sure when Margaret Trudeau did those 28 speaking engagements that she did for the organization, or when Prime Minister Trudeau's brother did his work. I know that the Prime Minister's wife, Sophie Gregoire, I think her work with them was 10 years ago, something like that, and she was reimbursed for some travel expenses. So I think that the essence of this really comes down to the question, was we given sort of an easy ride to this contract? Were they given preferential treatment? And this is something that the committee work will do and the ethics commissioner work will do in order to find out whether or not this happened the way it should have, or if there was an ethical breach.
So Ken ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਦੇ ਮਦਰ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬ੍ਰਦਰ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਾਈਫ ਹੈਗੇ ਸਪੀਕਿੰਗ ਅੰਗੇਜਮੈਂਟ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਸਦੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਵੀ ਮਿਲੇ ਹੈ। ਐਂਡ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਰਾਈਟ ਪਰਸਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇਣ ਵਾਲਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਐਥਿਕ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ ਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਸ ਫਾਈਲ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਵਿਊ ਕਰਨਾ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੂਗਾ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਕੌਨਫਲਿਕਟ ਆਫ ਇੰਟਰਸਟ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸੋ ਕੈਨ ਨਾਓ ਮੂਵਿੰਗ ਫੋਰਵਰਡ, ਐਂਡ ਬਾਈ ਦ ਵੇ all my viewers, ਸਾਡੀਆਂ phone lines open ਹੈ, our phone lines are open, you can still call. Even Ken is in Ottawa, I'm here in our studio in Surrey, British Columbia. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੰਬਰ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਤੇ ਫੋਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ, any question you want to ask him. So let's have a last question about this V charity. And I know that contract is cancelled, and where we stand now with this organization in a very short period right now. I know that there will be committees, there will be ethics commissioner already involved, and there will be a lot of questions I hope will be answered. But where you think we stand right now?
Well, right now, I think that in addition to the review that's going on at the government side, the We Charities themselves are also reviewing their practices. I'm sure that they do not welcome being the focus of any kind of a controversy, particularly because they have done good work. And I don't think that we should forget the fact that they have done good work and they've been very, very effective at it. It's really unfortunate that things have taken this course, because I could see even from the first week, while they were still engaged, tens of thousands of students had signed up. Charitable organizations, 92 of them alone in Surrey, were ready to welcome volunteers. And, as I say, it's unfortunate that things have ended up this way. We will do our best to rescue the program and make sure that the kids get their opportunities, and that the organizations who welcome the kids will get the services that those students can provide.
So कहना है कि we ਜਿਹੜੀ charity है ਇਹਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ। Obviously young ਤੇ youth people ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ trouble ਚੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ avenues provide ਕਰਨੇ, so they did a lot of coverage, ਆਪਣੇ help, and ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਇਹ very unfortunate ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਆਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ situation ਜਾਂ controversy create ਹੋਈ ਹੈ, and ਉਹਦੇ ਸਦਕਾ ਹੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਦੇ organization ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ organization ਹੈ ਉਸ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਾਰੀ organization ਨੂੰ view ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਉਹ changes ਲਿਆ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਤੋਂ my another question will be, like they call it me to we, and they do some for-profit activities as well, that they sell the learning experiences and products, even including cute necklaces and bracelets, and they say that half of that money goes to We Charity. What do you have any thoughts on that?
I really don't, because I am not personally as close to the organization, certainly, as our leader is. But there is no doubt, as I say, when you can fill BC Place Stadium multiple times, over the years with students for something that's very inspirational, something that promotes sort of civil activities, things that make our communities better. This is good. And the me to we thing is kind of interesting, CJ. I don't know if you recall that the 1960s was a time when, we had our 100th anniversary, we had Expo 67, we had all kinds of great things going on in Canada, and the nation was really bound together in a certain spirit. The 70s were interesting as well, because that was what people called the me decade, when all of a sudden, instead of, people focusing on what was good for the community or what was good for the country, the focus shifted for many people to themselves. And, this is the era of Wall Street, greed is good, et cetera, et cetera. And so the Me to We campaign really came along at a good time to bring us back to the fact that, especially in Canada, we do have this sense of the common good. That, yes, of course, we should have our own personal aspirations, things that we want for ourselves, but we also should contribute something to the community. And this is something that the We campaign actually promoted very effectively.
So, मैं Ken ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ question me to we, and me organization ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ for profit activities ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ activities ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ profit ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਉਹ 50% ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ। ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਸ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ environment ਸੀਗਾ 1960s ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ BC Place Stadium ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਭਰ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ organization ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਓਪਨ ਹੋਏ ਤੇ different organization, business organization ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ more and more what we can do more for the community kind of ideas came out of that. So your final comments on this issue, what you would like to our viewers to know about this controversy and where we are heading forward?
Well, I think it's worthwhile looking at this controversy, if you want to call it that. The S word, scandal, is thrown about, I think, a little too freely sometimes. Nobody, certainly in the Prime Minister's family, was going to make a lot of money, if any at all. It should not be a situation where, because you happen to have the support of a politician, that all of a sudden, you can't be involved in a government-run program. But then when we look at the states in other countries, where corruption can be, let's face it, a way of life, a way of doing business, there's that old expression that if you look after the little things, the big things look after themselves. So, if we're holding ourselves to a very high standard here, if something that is in fact relatively small in the grand scheme of things, like the we situation, is still given the kind of attention it is, that's a signal to everybody that we're not going to allow big things, the really serious things, to happen if we take the small things seriously.
सो कहना कहना है कि कंट्रोवर्सी या एस वर्ड कई यूज कर ले, स्कैंडल कर रहे हैं, पर पॉलिटिशियंस ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਆਲਵੇਜ਼ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਜਾਂ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਜੇ ਲੈਸਨ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੇ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਅੱਗੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਕਨਸੀਕੁਐਂਸਸ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਐਥਿਕਸ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ ਜਾਂ ਰਿਜ਼ਲਟਸ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਕੇ ਹਾਊ ਦੇ ਕੈਨ ਮੂਵ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ. One last question about this. When I listened to Andrew Scheer and Jagmeet Singh, the opposition leaders, they said, well, Aga Khan issue and then SNC Lavaland and now we, and where the buck stops. And is Prime Minister learning some lessons from these experiences?
Well, I'll offer a personal reflection. I try never to make the same mistake twice. However, I have learned throughout what have now become a lot of years that there's no end to the mistakes that you can make, especially if you put yourself out there. I mean, if we go back and, you dig into the details of the Aga Khan issue, we'll take that one as an example. There was a disagreement between, the Prime Minister, his office, and the Ethics Commissioner on what constituted a friendship, because if the Aga Khan had been deemed a friend of the Prime Minister, then that would have mitigated the nature of the trip that the Prime Minister took to the Aga Khan's island.
And he was a good friend of Justin's dad, Mr. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, as well.
Right. And exactly, but the ethics commissioner didn't see it that way, and even though we disagreed with that finding, it is what it is. I mean, it's, pardon the expression, it's not the ditch you're going to die in. SNC Lavalin, to be honest with you, CJ, I still think we did the right thing. The way that that legal action was headed could have brought down one of Canada's biggest companies and put a lot of people out of work. And given the fact that that activity, the whole thing around SNC, was happening during the NAFTA negotiations, which was really the prime focus of the Prime Minister, his office, Chrystia Freeland, and a whole bunch of others, this was so almost off the radar screen, in fact. Again, that one, I don't agree with the findings of the Ethics Commissioner. The one thing, though, that, and I'll be quite candid here, the India trip bothered me a lot. The reason for that was that as soon as we started to see the media coverage turn negative against the Prime Minister for the clothes he was wearing, for heaven's sakes, I mean, it's not exactly a huge scandal, but at the same time, where were the helpers? Where were the people to go in and say, hey, boss, business suits for the rest of the way here. The outfits that you're wearing aren't going over well at home. And I don't know that anybody did that. And as an old, corporate communication issues management guy, that drives me crazy, because somebody should have stepped forward and said, whoa, let's fix this. But that didn't happen. And, but that's, you know, that's maybe why they've got me around, is to tell them after the fact that they should have done it differently.
So can मैं पूछा कि ਜਿਹੜੇ opposition leader ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਐਂਡਰੂ ਸ਼ੀਅਰ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਜਗਮੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਉਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਆਗਾ ਖਾਨ ਵਾਲਾ ਕੰਟਰੋਵਰਸੀ ਹੋਈ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਐਸਐਨਸੀ ਲਾਵਾ ਲੈਣ ਦੀ ਹੋਈ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਹੁਣ 20 ਵਾਲੀ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਕੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਵੇਅਰ ਦਿਸ ਵਿਲ ਸਟਾਪ ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਗਾ ਖਾਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਫਰੈਂਡਸ਼ਿਪ ਵਾਲਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਸੀਗਾ ਐਂਡ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਥਿਕਸ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ ਦੀ ਫਾਈਂਡਿੰਗਸ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪੂਰਾ ਐਗਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਐਸਐਨਸੀ ਲੈਵਲ ਨੇ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ 100% ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਸੀਗਾ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦਾ that was a right decision because ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਜੌਬਸ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਸੀ ਬਾਕੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦਾ ਟ੍ਰਿਪ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਬੋਦਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਉਹ ਜਦੋਂ ਹੈਂਡਲਰਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹਨੇ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਆਊਟਫਿਟਸ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੇ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇਵੈਂਟ ਅਟੈਂਡ ਕੀਤੇ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਂਡਲਰ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਸਿਰ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਐਂਡ ਮਤਲਬ ਆਉਣ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫਿਕਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਐਂਡ ਯੂ ਆਰ ਰਾਈਟ ਔਨ ਦੈਟ ਇੰਡੀਆਜ਼ ਕੰਟਰੋਵਰਸੀ ਵਾਜ਼ ਨਾਟ ਹੈਂਡਲਡ ਵੈਰੀ ਵੈਲ ਐਟ ਦੈਟ ਟਾਈਮ you are 100% right about it because you know it could have been fixed while it was happening rather than afterwards.
Yeah, and of course there's more to that than meets the eye. I read a report from Parliament that said that there was other stuff going on, but you know what, that was then, this is now, so let's get on with life, right?
So ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਵਾਲੇ ਟ੍ਰਿਪ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੁਣ get on and let's another thing as a you know being a member of parliament being a senior guy being around for a long time we all make mistakes and I have nothing to do with age young or old and what are your take on when we learn from our mistakes and not to repeat mistakes and move on?
Well, you know, it sometimes it's, you know, like making a mistake isn't like an on-off switch. You flip it this way, you've made a mistake. You flip it that way, and you're right. Sometimes it's like a dimmer switch, you know. It would, I would like to hear, and I haven't had a chance to ask the question, but let's go back to the we thing for a second. What I hope to hear is that
Can you put on a hold? I have a caller here.
Break.
I hope you will be able to hear that. ਹਾਂਜੀ ਕਾਲਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਾਈਨ ਤੇ ਹੋ ਹੈਲੋ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਯਾ ਯੂ ਆਰ ਔਨ 에ਅਰ ਕਾਲਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਾਈਨ ਤੇ ਹੋ ਹਾਂਜੀ 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 ਯੂ ਆਰ ਔਨ 에ਅਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੈਨ ਹਾਰਡੀ ਨੂੰ I think the caller have a hard time coming through, so he can try again.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead, Ken.
Where was I?
We were talking about a mistake.
Mistakes, yeah. You know, it would be good if in the fullness of time we find that the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the Prime Minister's office, and the Public Service had a very thorough discussion about the implications of awarding a sole source contract to we. You know, and looked at it, understood the kind of things that we have seen, in fact, were a possibility, but based on what they perceived to be the benefits of going forward, that they thought that the risk was worth the risk. That's a different kind of mistake than not asking the questions, right, that needed to be asked about the risks involved in making this decision. So, I mean, these are the sorts of things that when I get the chance to talk to some people, this is what I'm going to ask, because if the right questions were asked, then okay, you zigged, you should have zagged. That's life. That happens. If, on the other hand, this was like the India trip where nobody was speaking up, well, that's not good, and that's something that we should have learned from that earlier episode. I have a feeling, though, that in this case, everybody went into the we thing with their eyes wide open as to what the implications were, but looking at First, the need to get this program out very quickly to help the kids and to help the organizations that they'd be volunteering at, and the need to, make sure that we could get money into the kids' hands in time for school this fall. I think that a considered risk was probably still the best way to go.
Okay. Sadi, I have a couple of calls for holding, but they waited enough. I didn't want you. So, ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਨਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਮੇਕ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, we all make mistakes, and when is the with his experience ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਵੀ ਕਿਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਗਲਤੀਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਸਿੱਖੀਦਾ ਜਾਂ ਰਿਪੀਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰੀਦੀਆਂ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਗਲਤੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਹਰ ਉਮਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ। ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬੈਟਰ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਸੀ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ contract ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ। So I can't believe it is almost half an hour. We will take a 3-4 minutes commercial break and then we will be right back. Just ਜਿਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ viewers ਹੈ, sorry, couple of calls ਆਈਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ interruptions ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ। ਸੋ 3-4 ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਰਤ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਮਰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ। ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਸਟੇ ਟਿਊਨਡ ਇਨ ਤੇ 3-4 ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਿਰ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਊਗੀ। ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਅੱਜ ਕੈਨ ਹਾਰਡੀ, ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਫਰੋਮ ਫਲੀਟਵੁੱਡ, ਪੋਰਟ ਕੈਲਸ, ਸਰੀ। ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ ਸੀਜੇ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਸ਼ੋ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਮੇਰੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਹਨ ਕੈਨ ਹਾਰਡੀ, ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਫਰੋਮ ਫਲੀਟਵੁੱਡ, ਪੋਰਟ ਕੈਲਸ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਟਰਮ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹ ਬ੍ਰੌਡਕਾਸਟਰ, ਜਰਨਲਿਸਟ, ਫਰੀਲੈਂਸ ਐਂਡ ਕਾਫੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਕਿਊਟਿਵ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਰਵ ਕੀਤਾ। ਸੋ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਬੈਕ ਕੈਨ।
Good to be back again, and always enjoy our chat, CJ.
Yeah, thank you. And we have a caller online. Hanji caller, ਤੁਸੀਂ question ਪੁੱਛ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਜੀ ਕੈਨ ਨੂੰ। So, Mr. Shekho, let Ken answer your questions. He got the message here. Let him answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't catch the whole question.
So
but,
yeah, it was a lot of echo going on. He was saying that same question I asked, that Aga Khan, and then after that SNC, Lavalan, and then now we organization, and he said, why don't have a full disclosure? A lot of people, he said, including liberals, are asking Prime Minister to resign and or step down while this controversy is sorting out. Then he have some questions about ethics commissioner. So it's so a bunch of questions altogether.
Sure, and I don't know which senior liberals he's talking about, because I haven't heard from any of them that suggests anything about a resignation. And don't forget, I mean, the ethics issue here is not a legal one; it's a political one. And the opposition will do what it always does, which is try and make as much of it as they can, and that's not. That's not something that shouldn't happen, and they'll always call for somebody to resign, of course, because that's a trophy that they would get, and it's not necessary. If you look back over the last 4 to 5 months. And what this Prime Minister and this government has accomplished for Canadians, you know, what we've done particularly to manage the COVID-19 pandemic in partnership with the provinces, notably in British Columbia, which has done an excellent job. Yes, of course, you know, the we controversy is something that should receive a good airing and should, you know, be given its due consideration. But at the same time, you know, we have spared millions of Canadians from a lot of heartache and grief, and maybe tens of thousands of them from dying, because we've managed this pandemic so well. So, you know, let's not get carried away here. Let's have a look and see what actually this government has been doing, and it's been doing a lot of really good stuff.
So ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਨਸਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਾਲਰ ਦਾ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਕੋਈ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਲੀਡਰ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਰਿਜ਼ਾਈਨ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਨੇ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ COVID-19 ਨੂੰ ਜਿਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵਸ ਪਿਛਲੇ 5 ਮਹੀਨਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਉਸ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਫੋਕਸ ਕਰੀਏ, ਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਹ ਕੰਟਰੋਵਰਸੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਕੰਟਰੋਵਰਸੀ ਨੂੰ ਲੈਟ ਦ ਸਿਸਟਮ handle it. Commissioners or other different committees will handle it. Let's switch the gear, Ken, from this controversy to, you know, that the recent one came out, the Russian hacking, and they're hacking and including Canada to research and development into the vaccine trials. And they, you know, and CKNW and different networks were reporting that there is even Russian government is denying it, but it seems like there's a valid reason for a concern. What are your take on that?
Yeah, I really don't know why they would do that. Because if Canada is successful at developing a vaccine, we'll make it available to the world. You know, there's no reason for anybody to need to steal it. You know, we're not about turning big profits for, you know, the big pharmaceutical companies. You know, a vaccine like this that can save, you know, perhaps millions of lives is something that the world should make. Just like Canada when it, you know, when Banting and Best developed insulin, or Dr. Jonas Salk when he developed the vaccine for polio. You know, there are some things that you do without dollar signs in your eyes. So I honestly have a hard time understanding why any other country would want to try and hack in and steal some of this information. I don't doubt that they do it. You know, Russia and China are both pretty darn good at it, and we're constantly fending them off. But this one is a bit of a mystery to me.
So ਮੈਂ ਕੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਹੈਕਿੰਗ ਹੈ, ਰਿਸਰਚ ਐਂਡ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਇਨਟੂ ਦਾ ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਫॉर COVID-19, ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਵਾਲੀ ਜਚੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਵੀ ਕਾਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਉਹ ਹੈਕਿੰਗ ਕਰਨਗੇ। ਜੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਡਿਵੈਲਪ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦਾ ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕਰ ਹੀ ਦੇਣਾ ਇਵੈਂਚੁਅਲੀ। ਸੋ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਵਾਈ ਦੇ ਵਿਲ ਡੂ ਇਟ। ਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਚਾਈਨਾ ਤੇ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟਰਾਈ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਪਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵੈਲਿਡ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ। I can think of a valid reason for this. If they can hack into the worldwide systems, because everybody is in a process of developing a vaccine, isn't it? If they, without other people's research, and they found the formula and come up with the drug for vaccine, isn't it make billions of dollars by doing that?
Well, I guess that it will depend an awful lot on how the country operates. I mean, there is one country that made no secret of the fact that if it developed a vaccine, it was going to keep it for its own citizens and to heck with the rest of the world. Okay, fine, you can hack that country if you like, but not Canada, because that's just not the way we roll.
So, Ken ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚ ਸਕਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਜੇ ਘਰੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਚੋਰੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਆਪ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਕਢਾ ਕੇ ਬਿਲੀਅਨਸ ਆਫ ਡਾਲਰਸ ਬਣਾ ਲੈਣਗੇ। ਪਰ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਬੜਾ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ। All right, then, well, let's talk about, you know, in British Columbia, especially, and you representing Surrey, British Columbia, overdose, Ken. is a very, very big issue in British Columbia. People are dying left and right. There is a no like color of this death. It can be all communities are affected. Um, what is your take on that? What is the problem? How we address this problem?
Well, we address the problem by not doing as much of what we have been doing for a very long time, which is trying to ask our police forces to solve the problem for us. Dr. Henry, who of course has absolutely distinguished herself in the pandemic, has joined a whole list of people, including chiefs of police from across Canada, calling for the decriminalization of personal possession of drugs. This takes it out of the hands of the police, puts it into the hands of the medical system where it belongs. You know, drug taking is a medical issue and a mental health issue in some cases, I'm sure. But to be honest with you, a personal reflection, when we look at the experience around the world, and Portugal keeps coming up. Last year, Portugal had probably less than a dozen overdose deaths because they treat it as a medical issue. They make sure that the supply of drugs, the people who are hooked on them, is safe. And this is the biggest problem in British Columbia right now, is that the street drugs are very toxic, highly toxic, which is one of the reasons why we've set new records for the number of fatalities in a month. Not only do we need to really talk about decriminalizing the possession, we also need to take that extra step of taking the production and the profits away from organized crime. Let's start dealing with this as a community health issue. Let's come up with the clean supply of these drugs that at least won't kill people while we try and get them off. That's something I think we need to talk about.
ਸੋ ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਓਵਰਡੋਜ਼ ਦਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈ ਆਪਣੇ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੇ ਮੌਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਇੰਨੀਆਂ ਹੋ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੀ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਹੈਲਥ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਡਰੱਗ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਬੋਨੀ ਹੈਨਰੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਫੀ ਨੌਲੇਜ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਐਂਡ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਪੁਰਤਗਾਲ 'ਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਹੈਲਥ ਇਸ਼ੂ, ਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਮੌਲ ਪੋਜੈਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਡਰੱਗਸ ਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਡੀਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ। ਸੋ in your thought, you think like a small portion of these drugs possession should be decriminalized or decriminalized altogether?
Well, the discussion you're going to hear will focus mainly on decriminalization and whether or not we would decriminalize all drugs. It's hard to say. And this is purely a personal reflection here, although it is a discussion that's going on amongst us MPs. Decriminalization, yes, absolutely, but also guarantee a safe supply, which means that you take organized crime out of the mix, because as long as you've got organized crime scooping the profits from this, which fund other illegal activities, you also have the problem with what we're seeing in British Columbia right now, which is the supply of drugs being highly contaminated and very toxic. So, you know, decriminalization, okay, that maybe takes the police out of the equation, maybe gets more focus on rehabilitation and getting people out of drugs. But we're still going to lose a whole bunch of people in the meantime, simply because the drugs themselves are so unsafe.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿਣ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਡਰੱਗਸ ਨੂੰ ਡੀਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਸਮਾਲ ਕੁਆਂਟੀਟੀ ਔਰ ਆਲ ਟੁਗੇਦਰ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਾਫੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਆਪਣੇ MPs ਵੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਸ 'ਚ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ ਐਕਟੀਵਿਟੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਕੱਢਣੀ ਪੈਣੀ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੇਫ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕਰਨੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਰੱਗ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, ਸੋ ਸੇਫ ਇੰਜੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਸਾਈਡਸ ਐਂਡ ਦੋਜ਼ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਐਕਟੀਵਿਟੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ, ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੀਹੈਬ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਲਾਨ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੀਕਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਇਸ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਬਚਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ। Let's touch upon a little bit of our relationship with China, Ken, because China, since Huawei controversy here and our two Michaels in China under arrest, there is a lot of controversy, you say, discomfort, and the families, their families are suffering immensely. What are your take on that?
Well, what we're seeing right now in our relationship with China is sort of the culmination of a direction that we took a number of years ago that we thought was the way to go that didn't work out very well. We felt that if we opened the door to China, we welcomed them into the United Nations, we liberalized trade with them, we did a bunch of other things, that would draw China into the world's club of democratic nations that would be looking after the welfare of its people and just basically, in some respects, turn them more like us. That didn't work. Instead, the economic policies that we saw in the 1970s with the likes of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan are precisely the reason why China has such economic power today, because they literally drove business out of Britain and the United States and a lot of other countries into China. So they've become bellicose, they've become bullies. Their economic stranglehold on certain countries has got to be a huge concern. And it's going to take, I think, a concerted worldwide effort to basically, knock them back a couple of pegs. I spoke with two very long-standing and very expert China watchers, Jonathan Manthorpe, whose book, The Claws of the Panda, is definitely required reading, and Hugh Stevens, another fellow who was our shadow ambassador to Taiwan for a while. And they both recommend that Canada join with like-minded countries, particularly in the Pacific Rim, particularly our partners in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, to start pushing back against China. One country alone, even the United States, probably isn't big enough, but if a whole bunch of countries do it, China's going to find out how many friends it has these days, and they're not many, and maybe that's the push they need to change their ways a little bit.
ਸੋ ਕੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚਾਈਨਾ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਣੀ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਹੈ ਕਾਫੀ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਵਾਵੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਗਜ਼ੈਕਟਿਵ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇੱਥੇ ਅਰੈਸਟ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦੋ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਮਾਈਕਲਸ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਰੈਸਟ ਕਰ ਰੱਖਿਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਬੜੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸੋਲਵ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਇਕੱਲਾ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਦੂਜੀਆਂ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟਿਸਿਸ ਚਾਈਨਾ ਦੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲੀ ਇੰਨੇ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਕਿ ਛੇਤੀ ਜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਪੰਗਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲਾਈਕ ਮਾਈਂਡਡ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਲਵ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੀ, ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੰਬਰ ਆਫ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਐਫਰਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ। So let's get on to this COVID-19 issue, Ken. So as of early on today, it's almost worldwide. We're touching 14 million people worldwide that are coronavirus cases. Our 591,000 deaths, and even 8.2 million people recovered. But the death toll is very, very high, and our friends in USA is a huge numbers because they opened up too early, and they are sitting at 3.6 million, and so staggering numbers. And Brazil and now India is at a third number. So tell us about government policies and how, like, we send this message worldwide to this pretty, the disease that killing people.
This is a real tough one, because the very thing that made the United States, such a powerful nation, such an exceptional nation, is working against them in this situation. The United States has long been the place where the individual feels free to chart their own course, take their own path. They would not abide by some of the things that Canadians are willing to accept, like socialized medicine and things where the government kind of sets the policies that shape how people live their lives. And it's this exceptionalism, this individualism that's, I think, created the environment in the United States where they will rebel against things like wearing a mask, like avoiding, congregating in bars or on beaches. The very, very thing that the COVID virus likes is also what Americans like to do. And that's the reason why their situation is so dire right now. Canada, for its part, and your government, has basically had two goals in mind throughout this: to keep Canadians safe and to keep our businesses healthy so that once things do get back to some sort of normal, our economy can pick up again. And generally speaking, CJ, the Canadian government made the decision that if there was to be a debt incurred in fighting the virus, that the government was in a better position to take on that debt than the average Canadian. I'll give you an example. We've run up a deficit of over $340 billion. We're financing that at 1% over 30 years, because interest rates are insanely low. And in fact, just as a sidebar, any financial person could verify this, across the world, there's $17 trillion with a T in bonds that are actually negative return. People are losing money by buying the bonds. That doesn't mean they can't sell them for more than they bought them for, but it still gives you the sense that the world is awash in money like it is in oil. In any event, we can borrow money at 1%. If you're feeding your family off your credit card, you're paying 19%. So for the good of the country and the good of the, of our communities, the government has stepped forward and we've run up this big deficit, which is totally manageable, to help millions of Canadians through this situation and millions of businesses as well.
So Ken ने काफी मतलब मेरा क्वेश्चन ये सीगा कि जिहड़ी कोविड दी सिचुएशन है ਉਹ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ 'ਚ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਬ੍ਰਾਜ਼ੀਲ ਐਂਡ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਐਂਡ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਦਾ ਨੰਬਰ ਹੈ ਚੌਥੇ ਨੰਬਰ ਤੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਹੈ। ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਖੁੱਲੀ ਛੁੱਟੀ ਜਲਦੀ ਦੇਤੀ, ਲੋਕੀ ਮਾਸਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਾ ਰਹੇ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੌਜ਼ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਬਜਟ ਦੀ ਕੀਤੀ, ਦਾ ਡੈਫੀਸਿਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ 342 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਔਰ ਸੋ, ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੋ ਇੰਟਰਸਟ ਰੇਟ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਮੈਨੇਜੇਬਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। So my last question, I'm glad you touched upon, and that's my favorite topic, is talking about economics and how. So, and expected to be ballooned because, there is no light end of the tunnel yet, until the vaccine comes. And that can, there is some economics, project as it can be a 1 trillion to 1.7 trillion even, the deficit. So number one, how we will fund that deficit, number one, and the government sources, taxes or services fee, are we going to increase that? Are we going to increase the taxes? Or the third question, very valid question, is, are our next generation will be left to pay this heavy debt?
Well, again, let's go back to the current economic situation that we're facing. Last fall, just after the election, Finance Minister Marneau brought in the fall economic update. And at that time, he gave an estimate as to what the debt service on our national debt was going to be, how much interest we would pay on the debt that we had. We fast forward to a week or so ago, and he provided a snapshot of where we were economically. And when you compare the debt level that we had last fall with the debt level we have now after all of the COVID-19 spending, because interest rates have gone down, our total debt service will actually be $4 billion less today, even with the additional debt, than it would have been last fall. So it is manageable. But I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a limit to how much we can borrow. There's a limit to how much the government can spend. What I can tell you is that there is zero interest in raising taxes, because right now what we need are people with disposable income that they can go into the community and use to buy the things that their families need. So the government doesn't necessarily want to, get in the way of that. And I mean, if things work out perfectly, what we do is we increase government revenues by helping the economy get bigger. You might remember a long time ago, the prime minister before he was prime minister, got accused of being silly when he said budgets can balance themselves. Well, in fact, they can. If you increase government revenue because more people are working and making more money, and the country is trading more, et cetera, then government revenues go up without raising taxes. And that's really a really neat way of looking after your financial situation. So going back to what I said at the beginning about our COVID-19 response strategy, first is to keep Canadians healthy, and secondly is to keep our businesses healthy so that we can be in that better situation.
ਸੋ ਕੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਡੈਫਿਸਿਟ ਬਜਟ ਹੈ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਇਵੈਂਚੁਅਲੀ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੇਟਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੋਤੇ ਪੋਤੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਡੈਟ ਪੇ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਮੈਨੇਜੇਬਲ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੰਟਰਸਟ ਰੇਟ ਲੋ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹਦੀ ਸਰਵਿਸਿੰਗ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉਹਦੀ ਕਾਸਟ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਮੈਨੇਜੇਬਲ ਹੈਗਾ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਐਜ਼ ਲੌਂਗ ਐਜ਼ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੇਫ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਹੈਲਥੀ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ, तो ये चीज़ां आपां नूं लॉन्ग टर्म हेल्प करनी है। Ken, I like to sincerely thank you for your time, and you're 3 hours ahead of us. It's almost 11 o'clock, and thank you for your time, and enjoy a drink of scotch before you go to bed, and thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm actually, I don't like these hours that we spend together because they go by so quickly, and I'm getting old here. But no, thank you very much, CJ. I always enjoy our chats, and it's good to connect with your viewers. And I hope everybody out there does stay safe and well.
Thank you, Ken. So, मेरी गल चल रही सी Ken Hardy, Member of Parliament from Surrey, Fleetwood, Port Kells. काफी विषयां ते अज गलबात हुई ते इसे ही तरह हर हफ्ते ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਵਾਂਗੇ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਵੀਕ ਥਰਸਡੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਆਫ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਜੂਡੀ ਡਾਰਸੀ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਵੀ ਟਾਕਡ ਅਬਾਊਟ the overdose and drug and mental health issues. So listen to first hand from a mental health minister. So please tune in next Thursday 7 to 8 o'clock as usual. ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਫ਼ ਤੇ ਸਪਸ਼ਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਪੁਨੀਤ ਆ ਰਹੇ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਪਪੂਲਰ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਫੋਨ ਨੰਬਰ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ, ਇਸੇ ਹੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਾਚ ਕਰਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰੋ ਤੇ ਆਪਦੀ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰਿਆ ਕਰੋ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ, ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ, ਰੱਬ ਰਾਖਾ। ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਸਟੇ ਸੇਫ, ਹੈਪੀ, ਹੈਲਥੀ ਐਂਡ ਹੈਪੀ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।